Good morning. It's Lana here from the Schoolhouse, and I actually am in the Schoolhouse this morning. Today, I have the absolute pleasure to chat with Jon Berkeley, one of Ireland's leading illustrators. Jon currently lives in Spain, and when I am chatting with Jon over the last few months as we prepare a little, an online class that we're going to be doing with him, he I've just find this fella absolutely hilarious, and he's also a very, very busy man. So I'm very delighted that he is going to be able to join me this morning. Coming in from sunny Spain today. It's absolutely pelting down in Wicklow. So let me see if we've got Jon coming in. Here we go.
Good morning,
Hi.
Darren. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing? I'm going to turn my volume up so I can hear you a bit better. How are you?
I'm good, just fine.
You look lovely and relaxed.
Yeah, it's all up front.
So this is your first Instagram live, so thank you for sharing this with us.
It is, and who knew I was out of date?
Yeah, so I've deleted that media, so we nobody even has to know that we tried this already, and then Jon's Instagram was out of date, so we had to go off and start again.
I had Bronze Age Instagram. I thought that was the way.
Probably still did the same trick. But so you and I have been chatting over the last few weeks preparing a caricature course that you're going to do online with us.
That's right.
And when I was kind of looking into what you do, I was knackered even reading about it. So you've done thousands of illustrations for covers of magazines, from the Times to the Irish Times and the Washington Post. You do illustrations for advertisements. You've written children's novels. You do portraiture. Is there anything that you don't do? How did you start in illustration, and how did you realize that you were going to make a career out of it?
Well, I've always drawn since I was very small. My dad's a civil engineer, or was until he retired, obviously. And he used to bring back, every now and then they'd clear out the office and he'd bring back these huge blueprints, and we would draw on the back of them. We always had piles of markers and pens and crayons and whatever, so you could do these enormous drawings in the back of these used blueprints. And we were encouraged by both our parents to draw all the time, and I just never grew out of it.
That's amazing. And then so you started, you had a studio here with other illustrators, is that right? In Dublin, when you were still in Dublin?
I did. I was away for a few years in various places, and I came back to Dublin in 1992. And I shared a studio on Bagot Street at the time with Roger O'Reilly and PJ Lynch and Angela Clark and a few other illustrators. So that was good fun.
And when did you, like, how did you kind of start the career? Did you go from doodling on the back of your dad's massive pieces of worksheets to then realizing I'm going to make a career out of this?
Well, I loved album covers, especially when I was a kid. I mean, in those days, you had the album covers, and that was a fantastic canvas. And some of the greatest illustrators of the time were working on those. There were people like Roger Dean and Hypnosis, Peter Storm. Was it Peter Storm? And you know, Barney Bubbles and all these guys. And these were all fantastic illustrators, and they were obviously their brief was basically to just let rip with their imaginations. So I always loved getting the album covers as much as listening to the music itself. And the same with book chapters and things. Things like that always just caught my eye. And since I had no ambition to get a real job, I just thought, well, I can draw, and if I get better at drawing, hopefully someday I'll be doing album covers. But of course, by the time I left college, the album covers had shrunk down to CDs, and then CDs vanished off. So I had to look
Yeah,
for
and
different.
I guess the development of what people can do digitally now as well has probably changed how things like covers and that can look, or the choice that people can have. So like I remember even my mother-in-law's dad used to paint advertisements on the side of buses. So it was like, because they didn't have big printing machines. So yeah, there was a massive I guess, influence from illustration and what people can do freehand.
Yeah.
But what you're able to achieve um, in terms of the face recognition, in terms of, say, the caricatures that you do, and we kind of touched on it when we were chatting about your course with us, but you talked about the face recognition. And for me, when you said that, it reminded me of what you have to go through now if you get the chance to go through an airport again, and they have that kind of scan for face recognition, but you have a different skill and understanding of what that means.
It is becoming a very, very current topic again. I mean, first of all, I'm not a psychologist or a neurologist or any other kind of ologist. But I calculated a while back that I've probably drawn more than 10,000 faces since I started illustrating. So these are just my own observations and how I try and capture the character behind a face and how I put it together. And there are some rules, if you like, that are quite simple that you can follow, and it's mainly about observation. It's mainly about looking before you put your pencil to the paper, and just trying to see what's the first impression you get, what's the immediate impression you get from a face. You know, there's big wide mouths, there's, you know, and some people have, say, very fair coloring, so there's no visible eyebrows and this kind of, you know, there's a kind of an instant thing. But that got me to thinking about, I mean, recognizing a face is probably the first task that your brain is set when you're born. You know, as soon as you can focus your eyes, face recognition is kind of the first thing you embark on. And it's as I say, I'm not a neurologist, but we've got to be all experts in recognizing faces. So what I try and do when I'm teaching caricature is to kind of reverse engineer that process and try and help people to see how that works and see how they can actually use it as a method for drawing faces.
Yeah, it's a really clever observation. Like that whole idea of, you know, obviously recognizing faces from an early age. And in terms of the anatomy of a face, it's all, you know, most of us are lucky enough to have two eyes, a nose, a mouth, two ears, and skin, hair. And then, but somehow, and because your post-its, I don't know if anybody's seen the post-its that you do, but with maybe 5 or 6 lines, you've captured the person's face on a post-it. How did the idea of this post-it and the lines come about?
Well, funnily enough,
it's so clever.
I mean, there are some very some brilliant caricaturists who that is their style, to just stick with a few lines and dots and stuff. And Al Hirschfield and people like that could just capture people with such elegant, simple lines. But the idea for me for the birthday post-its came from really, I mean, I follow a lot of other illustrators and artists, obviously, on Instagram. And most of us who do faces or regularly do caricatures or portraits, we kind of, obviously it's important to post on a regular basis and to have your work out there all the time. So the obvious thing is to look through today's birthdays, which you can find online very, and you find a few prominent people, and with any luck, if you've been in the business for years, you'll have already done caricatures of them at some stage. So it's a way of just going through your portfolio and selecting a few images to show. And on some days, even though there's only 365 days of the year, oddly enough, I find that there are some days that I've no birthdays at all for. So I started doing post-its because sometimes, you know, if I've nothing particular to post on a particular day that's relevant in any specific way, I'll sometimes do a sketchbook, you know, quite a detailed drawing or something. But sometimes you're too busy to do that, and you know, I can't afford the time to spend an hour or two doing that. So that's where the idea for the post-its came from. I would just scan today's birthdays, and I'd pick 4 or 5 people who have very distinctive features, and I would try and capture them really just because of the time constraint. Initially, I tried to capture them in just a couple of lines, and that got me thinking about that's actually a process that I do anyway internally when I'm starting on a caricature, even if it's going to be a very finished painting in the end. I will always start by just trying to catch what's the essentials of the geometry of that face. What is it that makes that instantly? Because if you think about it, you can recognize somebody you know from 200 yards away on a crowded street, or you can recognize people, you know, on a TV screen in the background that you've never met, but you've just seen in a few movies or something. It's astonishing what we can actually do with very little data. It could be dim light, it could be people can be far away, but you can still, our capacity for recognizing a face that we've seen before is really astonishing. So the more I did these birthday post-its, the more I thought, well, that's a very useful exercise. That will be a very useful exercise to start with, which we're going to do in the first class of our course.
Yeah, I think it's a work of magic. Like, obviously on our site now we have some of those birthday post-its up to advertise, to support your class that you're going to be doing with us, but they're really clever. They're so cleverly done. And I said to you, I felt like I'm talking to a shrink a little bit, where I'm wondering if you're reading my mind, but I actually am now wondering what caricature, what pieces have you picked out. And but then you said you switch that on and off. You don't always, people don't have to worry about talking to face, that you're not drawing a caricature in the back of your mind.
Whether you should feel self-conscious about it. I mean, if you like, when we get off this chat, I'll do you in 2 minutes and post it.
Oh, thanks. Okay. Well,
that's going to make you less self-conscious, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'll tell you afterwards. I'll tell you when I see it. Okay. So, how quick then your process? Like, unless you've been working for thousands of years and you actually have some anti-aging serum, your turnaround for your work must be quite quick, and you must have a very good structure for your work if you're turning around such a volume. Would that be fair to say? Do you have a kind of a structure?
Well, I've been working since, you know, as far as the numbers go, since 1983 or so. That was when I graduated from college.
Okay.
And I've worked for newspapers, which is, you know, most of my work is for newspapers or magazines. So there's a quick turnaround. And sometimes you get a client who just really likes working with you, and they're comfortable and they know what you're going to produce, which in newspaper work especially is quite important, because with the turnaround time being short, editors don't always have time to do preliminary sketches and that sort of thing. The time scale on a magazine illustration tends to be a little longer, and there's usually a couple of more stages. But I used to work for the Sunday Tribune when I was in Dublin in the 90s, and they were just across the road from it. And I was very lucky with them because I got on well with several of the editors there, the sub-editors, and I used to do sometimes 4 or 5 illustrations in the one issue.
Okay.
So you have to.
So you didn't really have the luxury of time.
I love short deadlines. I don't know if it's because I've worked with them for so long, but you know, it really focuses you. If you've got a few hours to produce something, it's great for removing distractions. Whereas if I've got a longer deadline, if I've got a week or something, I'll go and I'll weed the garden or do something else, and I'll do an awful lot of fannying about before I even sit down to my desk. You know, so I prefer the tight deadline. You just sit down and you get on with it. Okay,
so working under pressure kind of focuses your mind.
Yeah, and sometimes it stops you getting too fussy with an idea. You have to kind of grab the essentials and just run with it.
And I guess from having, you know, from working for doing this for so long, there comes a confidence and a sort of understanding how the process is going to go in terms of your output.
Yeah, there is. And I mean, confidence is a good thing mainly. Sometimes it can get a little bit out of hand. There have been, I'd like to say in more than 30 years of illustrating, there have been about 2 or 3 occasions when I've just totally dropped the ball. And it is absolutely mortifying as a freelancer to come up with something that you know is not up to scratch. It's a horrible feeling, and it stays with you for years. I can still remember all the thankfully very few occasions when that has happened. So as long as your confidence doesn't lean over into cocky, it's a good thing. But yeah, it's a good thing not to be scared that you're not going to come up with something. And the parts of your brain that you use for illustrating are like any other part of your brain or any other muscle. If you use it all the time, it will come up with the goods. There's certain kind of pathways of thinking. If for example, I read an article in a magazine that I illustrate, I just start doodling with a pen, and I doodle very, very quickly all the ideas that could go into that or could be even vaguely relevant, and then you start to see things matching up, and sometimes there'll be a very serendipitous coincidence between one image and another, or one phrase that you've written down on another, and it is a process, and it gets easier all the time, really. But then you want to push yourself as well. Sometimes you want to look at your work and say, okay, am I getting formulaic here? You have to push yourself also, and try and produce better work.
And do you use digital alteration at all, or is it all freehand, like work like that, like drawing and illustration?
I got really excited when computers first came out. Not laptops, but desktop computers. That's, when I started out, there was no such thing. And when programs like Painter and Photoshop and those kind of things, which were still fairly crude and basic when they first came out, and a lot of illustrators I knew kind of panicked, and they said, within 3 years we're going to be obsolete, because any coffee boy in the office is going to be able to just feed something into a computer and an illustration will pop out, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was saying, oh, I don't think so at all. This is a tool, and it's an incredibly versatile one. And I got very interested in it, and I did a lot of digital work, and this would be sort of mid-90s when I first started working digitally, and I did a lot of work that was purely digital. And I was very impressed with some of the work of other artists who were using digital media. A guy called Eric Dinier I came across, who does these incredibly atmospheric illustrations that are combinations of photographs and textures and quite dark and this kind of thing. So I was experimenting with all that kind of thing, and my work, I think at one stage was probably more digital work than traditional media, but it kind of settled back down again. I would say now probably about 20% of the work I do is digital, and the rest is with traditional media. But having said that, when I scan a piece, I will often tweak it a little bit. There's always some little bit of extra cheating you can do.
Because I imagine, like, from the work that you've done and the work that you produce, you obviously have a very creative mind. So I imagine if you don't, I guess, like you said, like if you don't flex that muscle in your brain, it'll start to really want to. Or do you see it like work? Do you see it like you're a trained you're a trained artist now, so it comes more from a professional, logical process, or do you feel like creativity needs to be expressed? And
there's always a great buzz when something comes together. I mean, you never lose that. I hope you never lose that. I haven't lost it yet. So sometimes, there is definitely a process, like I said, and it is a process of sorts, but you do get the kind of flash of inspiration, which inspiration is not, some people tend to think of inspiration as this very kind of mysterious, esoteric thing, and they wait for the muse to alight on their shoulder and this sort of thing. But really, the inspiration comes from the groundwork. You put in all the doodling and the process, and then something will just click sometimes. And when that comes together, it's great. So yeah, at 3 a.m. sometimes it feels like work. If I'm up working deadline, but most of the time I feel incredibly lucky to be able to work in a job like this. I mean, I could be in a sewer shoveling shit, basically. Everything's a plus from that level.
Yeah, I mean, you seem far away from shoveling shit in a sewer, so that's good.
I hope so.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. Well, look, it would be a long way to have to go, so I think you're safe. What are you working on at the moment?
I have a client who I've worked for many years in Hong Kong. It's a big financial institution, and they produce financial reports, but they decided very early on that they didn't want them to have kind of boring mechanical looking covers. I've done covers for them for more than 30 years, I think now.
Wow.
And I've always got a couple of them on the desk. I'm also working on a project, a new publishing project, which I can't say anything about because I'd have to kill you afterwards.
Oh,
So a bit of this and a bit of that, basically.
that sounds great. I'm not going to ask anymore. Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, it's leaving us guessing now. We'll have to keep in touch so we find out what that is. You can do
Yeah,
a grand reveal.
It might not come off. This is a pitch
Yeah,
project, but
we'll keep our fingers crossed for you, whatever this like a lead thing is.
I'm working
You're
on a portrait commission as well, which they come up from time to time. You know, a client or somebody who contacted me through a client wants a private portrait commission done, so I have that on the desk.
your portraits are fabulous.
Yeah, I like to have 2 or 3 things on the go, preferably at a time, different things, because you can kind of juggle the deadlines from a practical point of view. You know, if one of them's getting a bit behind, you can shelve the other one and work on that. But also, it just keeps you from getting bored with one particular job, or you know, it's always good as well at some stage in the work to leave it for a couple of hours or a day and come back to it and look at it again and see what cock-ups you did the day before and that you can correct.
And where did the children's books come from? Because that, like, to write a trilogy of books must have been, you know, was it something that you always wanted to do? Was it a story you had in your head? I'm really looking forward to reading them.
It was a change of gear, certainly, and something I really enjoyed doing. How it came about was I had an agent. I have an illustrator agent who gets me work for editorial and advertising world and that kind of thing. But I also have a children's literary agent, and I had done a couple of illustrated picture books through her. And this was quite a long time ago now. I was chatting to her on the phone one day, and I was asking her how the market was going and what was happening and this kind of thing. And she said that she had just sold 2 books. She had just negotiated 2 contracts with HarperCollins in the US for children's books, for kind of 8 to 12-year-olds books, with 2 illustrators who had previously been illustrators and had turned their hands to writing. And she had promised HarperCollins that she'd come back later in the year to New York and make it a hat trick. And she said, I've got nothing to bring them. So I said, well, I have a few ideas knocking around in my head. I've always got stuff on the back burner, but I have a very, very slow back burner. There can be stuff there for 10 years that I never actually get around to doing. So I put together a synopsis. I wrote the first few chapters of a story for her and put together a synopsis, and she took that over to the States. And then she phoned me up one Friday afternoon and said that she had a kind of an auction going on for the rights to this book. She had interest from, I think, 5 different publishers, which kind of knocked me sideways. I thought it was an extremely long shot just to get a book contract at all for a novel when I had never written anything like that before. Yeah. So she started phoning me up every 20 minutes after that, because I had thought that, you know, you hear about rights auctions and that kind of thing, and you think I always thought they spread out over weeks or something, but this was all happening like an actual auction, and she was phoning me up every 20 minutes.
Wow.
Saying, this publisher has offered that and this publisher has offered the other. And myself and my wife went out to a Chinese restaurant because we were getting very giddy at this stage, and we took the phone, we went out, and it kind of took a really surreal turn about halfway through, because one of the publishers, I think, had dropped out, and another one had said, well, we can't go any higher on 1 book, so we'll offer you a 2-book contract. And I said, great. And I was saying to my all the time, because I was very kind of nervous about this, and I was saying to her, just take the best offer, take the money and run, you know. But she knew what she was doing, and she said, no, no, this has more to run. I was afraid that I'll just back out and say, oh, sod off, you
Yeah.
know, we'll go and get something else. But it was a funny time, this, because it was, I think the Harry Potter book 5 or 6 had just come out. So there was a huge renewal in popularity in reading in that age group. All the kids were reading, and all the publishers were pumping stuff out, and they had a fair bit of cash from all this kind of surge in reading, and they were all desperately looking for something that could realize even a tenth of what the Harry Potter books had made. So they were on the lookout for new series, basically, that kids could move on to once the Harry Potter things were finished. So it was just a good time. It was kind of catching a wave, basically.
Oh, that's brilliant.
We were sitting there anyway in this restaurant, and my agent phoned up again, and she said, Julie Andrews has read your book and she really likes it.
Oh my God.
What? I think actually what I said was, how the hell did Julie Andrews get hold of my book?
Yeah.
Anyway, it turned out Julie Andrews and her daughter Emma Walton Hamilton are both write children's books and have published quite a lot between them. And they had an imprint at the time with HarperCollins, and one of the editors in HarperCollins had passed the synopsis on to Julie Andrews, and she had read it and said, I like that. And then they came back with a 3-book contract. So it was a lot of planets aligning at the right time. It was just a big stroke of luck, but it was a very enjoyable thing to get working on. And it was, I said earlier that I like short deadlines. This was a very, very long deadline. So it was quite challenging, I found, to kind of pace myself and stuff. But you could at least kind of, you know, I knew roughly how many words I should be producing, and you can kind of divide that up into, the contract gave me, I can't remember, 6 months or something to complete the first draft. So
wow.
I just kind of worked away on it.
And so you went from having never written a full novel before to getting a contract to writing a trilogy. I assume is that how the auction ended, that someone had given you a book deal for three books?
That was it. It all happened within about 3 hours. Yeah. It was very, very strange.
Well, I get pleasure from just reading the emails that you send me, so I'm really looking forward to reading your books.
Oh, good. Yeah, well, you don't have to be 12 to read them, I think.
No, well, I'm not 12 and I'm going to read them. So I have children that I'll pretend, you know, well, I can read them the stories at bedtime, but it'll be for my own enjoyment, get me away from like the Mr. Men books, or, you know, we'll evolve our taste a little bit.
When I was writing them, my own kids were small, and I was reading, you know, the chapter or two that I'd just written, I would read to them in the evening as their bedtime story. And you know, you can watch them to see if they start snoring. Then obviously you need to choose that.
You need to add a little bit of.
It was a good kind of sounding board, and you could tell what made them laugh and that kind of thing. But also, it helps with the kind of voice that you're writing in, because you're aware all the time as you're doing that if an adult is going to be reading that to a child, there has to be something in it for the adult as well. If the book is really boring for the adult, and you'll find this, I'm sure you found this even with picture books, you know, for very small kids. There's lots of wit and humor, and some of it, you know, is kind of aimed at you, really keeping you interested in reading the book to your kid, which you know,
definitely
it has to work on several levels.
Yeah, well, that's part of the argument at bedtime in my house, is like, I want to read certain books because I can tolerate them, and my kids want me to read something different, and I'm like, can I just read the one that I like, that, you know, that I can sort of jazz up? So I'm really looking forward to bringing these books home.
Yeah, kids do have different criteria, and it's funny because some of the books, you find that some of the books they really like are ones that you think are fantastic as well, and then others you just think, why the hell do they like that? But
yeah, I guess it's
figure out what's appealing to them and what's actually catching their attention, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well done on finishing that project so well. And so you're going to be doing a caricature course with us soon.
Yes.
We do still have Yeah, sorry.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really good. I loved even putting together the information about the course. I think it's going to be so much fun for the people that join it. I think you're going to share some of your kind of the magic tricks you have in your back pocket on creating the work, the caricatures that you do. Um,
Hmm.
I know that there's a few spaces left. It's a 4-week course starting in June online because you're based in sunny Spain. Well, I don't know what the weather is like there today, but it's storm here. We're
It's nice.
yeah, you don't have we won't talk about it too much because it's pelting rain down here and the forecast doesn't know what it's at the moment. Um, but yeah, so what if you were to what should people expect from this caricature course that you're going to be?
Well, that's a good question. I'm going to start from the basics. So you don't need to necessarily, all you need to do is, all you need to have is an interest in caricatures, an interest in faces. And if I don't feed this cat, he's going to knock that camera over. Go away.
Is that what it is?
not,
My cat.
not me meowing in the background, I assure you.
Oh,
Uh,
it's
yeah,
cats are so,
sorry.
and he's not going to leave you alone.
No, no, he's not bad because they
They're
only
so
bite here,
persistent.
right in the center of it. You know, if I stuck him up in the camera, he'd probably be happy. Um, Yeah, the course we'll start from the beginning and we'll go through all the business of how a face is constructed, in my opinion, and
Great.
how I can extract the personality from a face. Look at that. Go away.
You know that your cat is coming in.
Work with children or animals.
John, I have serious suspicions on how you want to end phone calls. I know you told me, now I know it's your sister-in-law who told you the trick. The last time there was a
Yeah,
sparrow
no,
trying to get out of your window, and now your cat's looking for food.
it's the cat trick. That's really my foot actually nudging the bottom of the tripod.
Yeah. And you've got your phone, the noise for text messages coming in is the cat's meow. And that's
That's
what you
it.
do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I have people.
Well, look, I will let you go and feed your cat, because I've taken up enough of your time this morning, and I hope everyone enjoyed our little conversation this morning. Um,
Well, it's
so,
been a pleasure.
yeah, always. I really enjoy our chats, and I'm sure I'll be chatting to you again soon. But if anyone wants to check out the course that you're doing, they can see it on our website. And then definitely, oh, I never got to find out why you call your website Holy Trousers. But if anyone wants to see more about Jon Berkeley, you can check out holytrousers.com.
Oh yes. Well, I can tell you that briefly if you want.
Okay,
I
go on.
when I started, as I said, I was kind of a bit of an early adopter with the computer. I was all excited about all the possibilities of it. And when the internet was first appearing, I had a look on Alta Vista, which was the main
Oh yeah.
search engine at the
So
time. And I looked up illustrators because I thought maybe I'll put up some of my work on this new internet thingy and how will that work? So I searched for illustrators, and at the time there were only about 100 illustrators on the internet. In fact, I think it was fewer than 100. I think about 80 results came up.
wow.
And it was just a text list of sites. And the names of the sites were all Fred Blogs Illustration, Mary O'Reilly Illustration, whatever. And I just thought, well, because there were no images or anything associated with them. And I thought nothing would particularly tempt me to click on any of those if it's not a name you know already, for example. And then there were just one or two that were called Blue Moon Studios or something like that. And it just evoked some kind of an image. So you would naturally click on those first. So I said, okay, it needs a more colorful title of some kind to show up on the list. And there was a movie with Michael Caine and Sean Connery in it called The Man, what was it? The Man Who Would Be King, about the British adventurism in Afghanistan in the last century. And East, I will have you killed and stuffed. So there's a phrase that Sean Connery uses a lot in that film. Anytime they get in a pickle, as it were, and he goes, "God's holy trousers." So I thought I'd call it God's holy trousers, And then there was a reason for not calling it God's Holy Treasures. I think it would attract
Oh, possibly. Yeah, I know where you're going
there. References or something like that. So I just called it Holy Treasures. It was shorter to type anyway. So that's the Holy story. It was just basically to come up with something that was memorable and that people would actually remember easily.
What's your cat's name? I'm going to say hello to it. Beast?
My cat's name is Mr. Bitey.
Mr. Bitey?
Mr. Bitey.
Well,
Mr. Bitey Jr. actually.
Oh, what happened to Mr. Bitey Sr.?
Bitey Sr. was a bit of a rogue, Tom, and he wandered off and either went on a murder spree or got killed himself or something. Probably he never came back.
Okay, so well, I'm going to let you go and feed Mr. Bitey Jr. And thank you so much for your time, Jon, this morning. Well, always entertaining.
It's more a case of me letting you go, actually, I think.
Not at all. Well, I just know how persistent cats are, but thank you for sharing all your information about what you do, having a chat with us this morning, your time, starving your cat for the suffering of this little chat.
Yeah,
and yeah, exactly. And we will chat again soon. Thanks a million, Jon, and thanks to everyone for watching.
All right.
All right. See you soon. Bye. Bye-bye.